Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome, virtually at least, to Gibson's Bookstore, best-selling author John Grisham. This is amazing. Good morning, Mr. Grisham.
Let's go with John, okay? Uh, my,
Okay.
da- my dad was Mr. Grisham. I'm just John. Happy to be here at Gibson's in Concord, New Hampshire.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, John, you're a writer who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it just a little bit anyway. You're a couple of years older than me, born in 1955. Not to give anything away there, but your books have been translated into 42 different languages. You've sold, I think, at last estimate, a zillion copies. That's what Wikipedia should have said. Your first novel, published in 1989, was A Time to Kill, and then came The Firm, and then after that, it was just off to the races for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So I've been reading you, sir, since the early 90s. I would always get to LaGuardia early when I was going on a business trip, and I would look for the latest John Grisham. And often it was there because you published so many great books, and that would make the trip guaranteed to be great.
Thank you for your loyalty.
Been reading you for so long. I guess that means I'm old.
Nah.
Nah. So thanks for joining us. So I just want to say, in the Camino Island books, your main character is a charming rogue of a bookseller who solves murders in his spare time and is irresistible to the ladies. So I just want to ask you, why did you pattern this character after me? Because
He is totally fictional. I've never met a bookseller like Bruce Cable, or a bookstore where they make so much money with no staff and long lunches and no hard work. It's amazing what you can do with fiction.
I was so envious as I read it. Well, it's a true beach read. It takes place on an island in Florida that's famous for tourism, Camino Island. And so far, we have Camino Island, and the latest is Camino Winds, which takes place during and in the aftermath of a hurricane.
Right. When I finished Camino Island 3 years ago, by the time I finished the manuscript, I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters, and I loved the setting. I loved the little bookstore on Main Street in the fictional town of Santa Rosa on Camino Island, and I knew I would go back for more stories. I don't know how many. I mentioned this to Doubleday a couple of years ago. They were quick to pull out a contract and sign me to 2 more books. So Camino Winds is number 2. Number 3 will be out hopefully in 2 or 3 years, and I'll space them between I do a legal thriller every year because I have for 30 years, because they are still very popular, and a lot of people expect the legal thriller in the fall, in time for Christmas. That's my schedule now. I used to publish in March, now publish in October to catch the Christmas market. All the big names come out in the fall. But I also enjoy the shorter books, the smaller books, the kids' books, the sports books. I have far too much time to write these days, Mark.
We all have a lot of time. It's interesting to fill the days. So you write. You're into sports. I understand you're a big baseball fan.
Well, I grew up, all the kids on my street in the suburb of Memphis in Mississippi, we all loved the Cardinals, and we were going to play for the Cardinals, and that was life and death in those days. The games were on the radio every night, wherever we were, in the car, the house, at the Little League ballpark. The Cardinal games were on the radio. That was our contact to the outside world, and had big dreams, not much talent, and I finally kind of petered out at the age of 20 in college, and saw a fastball one day that was real fast. I never wanted to see another one, so I knew my career was over. And my coach, who cut me, said, he said, "Why don't you forget about baseball and hit the books?" And I did. I followed his advice. Didn't plan to be a writer, but I do love sports, and I love almost all American sports. Big fan of baseball, the Cardinals. Big fan of college football, college basketball. We live in Charlottesville, Virginia. UVA is here, and so we really get world-class college sports in this town, and we're very much into that. My wife is a huge UNC Tar Heel fan, and we put all the games down there, all the games here, so we get we get a lot of basketball and football, and we're just sick because we missed March Madness, and now we're missing the baseball season, and so it's
Oh
we
yeah.
I mean, even thinking about writing. I've written 2 football books and 1 baseball novel, and I've been waiting for a good basketball story, and I think I've got it. And
Oh
I'm
really?
probably going to try that next as soon as I finish A Time for Mercy, the book I'm writing now that comes out in the fall. I may give a shot at a basketball novel.
Yeah. Well, you Charlottesville is a great basketball town.
Well, it sure is. After last year, we have the best coach in the country, and just a great, classy program with great kids, and they don't turn pro after 1 year. They hang around, get their degrees, and we won it all last year. It was quite a thrill.
Oh yeah. So you mentioned A Time for Mercy. That's set in the same universe as A Time to Kill, isn't it?
It sure is. It takes place 5 years after the trial of Carly Haley, which was the focal point of The Time to Kill. It features Jake Brigance, his lawyer, our hero, back in the courtroom. Another big, ugly murder trial in a small town, and Jake's in the middle of it. And uh, with all the subplots and all the things, that's where I'm from. That's what I know. Those people. I was a lawyer like Jake for 10 years, and he inspired me to sort of create the first story. And I waited almost 20 years for a sequel. Sycamore Row was a sequel, came out 7 years ago. And I'm not sure how many big trials Jake can have in one small town, though, but he's in the middle of one right now, and I'm almost finished with it.
He's got an interesting career as a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure. I never had so much drama in my law practice in a small town in Mississippi, and I'm not sure how many big time cases Jake can handle. He's not even 38 years old yet. This is his third one, so I'm going to take Jake slow.
Well, maybe if you'd stuck with the lawyer thing for a little bit longer, the big case might have come along, but instead you chose to write about it.
Yeah, when I quit after 10 years, I practiced law for 5 years. I mean, after 5 years of a 10-year career, I got the bug to write, and I started writing The Time to Kill. It took 3 years to write that. It came out in '89, and it didn't sell. But I had another story up my sleeve that I thought would be more accessible, more commercial, more popular, not quite as heavy as The Time to Kill, and that was The Firm. When The Firm came out in March of 1991, that changed everything overnight. And I suddenly lost interest in the law and lost interest in politics. And I said, I'm going to write full time. But the second 5 years, the second half of my legal career, I was quite unhappy with the law because it was going nowhere. And I had this dream of writing for a living is pretty much a dream. And for me, it has come true. It's still coming true. But I don't miss the days in the courtroom.
Yeah. So you mentioned A Time to Kill. That was brought out by a very small press originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, when I finished the book and started submitting it, this was long before the internet. This was 1987 or so, 88, and it was a classic submission rejection routine. I would send off a bunch of submissions to publishers and agents, and back then you could submit to publishers. You really can't do that now. You have to go through an agent. And I got a lot of rejections from my first rejection letter was from Doubleday, from a senior editor at Doubleday, who said some very nice things about A Time to Kill. And I kept that letter. And then when Doubleday bought the firm and I went to New York for my victory lap, I took the letter with me and showed it to the editor. We had a big laugh. He thought it was great, and he was happy that Doubleday had picked up the firm. And Doubleday's published every book since the firm. I have a great team there, and they're loyal to me. I'm loyal to them, and we're all great friends. So I've been very lucky in that respect. But back to Wynwood, after a bunch of agents said no and a bunch of publishers said no, I got the magic phone call one day from an agent in New York. The guy had been around for a long time. The guy who was well known in the business. And he said, "I want to represent you." That was the first magical phone call I got in this career. He took A Time to Kill back around the block a few times, and everybody said no for the second time. And about a year went by before a small unknown publishing company called Wynwood Press bought the book and published it in 1989. They printed 5,000 hardback copies and never went back for any more. Not at that time. No paperback, no foreign rights, nothing. It was just kind of a, kind of a dud. And then I guess after the firm came out and became so popular, people realized there was an earlier book. And once that happened, then Time to Kill started selling and has never stopped.
Oh, well, it's a great book. It's also a rare book now in that first edition, isn't it? Rare books feature into the Camino Island books.
Yeah, Time to Kill, a pristine copy of the Winwood Press version of Time to Kill is pretty expensive. And then we moved to Oxford in 1990, and I was a full-time writer. And we were hanging around the Square Books, the great bookstore there, and there were a lot of writers there at the time, and it was a great literary environment. And it was 1990, 30 years ago.
Yeah, Willie Morris was there, right? Barry Hannah.
Willie Morris was still the writer in residence at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And Willie's, when I was in law school, Willie was the writer in residence. He hated teaching. He wasn't going to teach. He couldn't show up for class. And his idea of teaching was to bring all of his New York buddies down to hang out and drink in Oxford for 2 or 3 days. And so I had a law professor who loved literature, and I got extra credit as a law student for going to sit and listen to Robert Penn Warren, William Styron, George Plimpton, Truman Capote. that was Willie's lineup. He brought them to Oxford one at a time, James Dickey, and would hang out with them. We'd see them in bars. And anyway, then we moved to Oxford, and Willie was gone by the end. Barry Hannah was still around. Larry Brown had just broken out.
Yep.
A lot of great writers. And back then, again, this is before the internet, before virtual touring with Zoom as we're doing now. When writers, you hit the road, you went on the book tour, and you hit 35 cities in 30 days and tried to make something happen. But they all came through Oxford at Square Books. I mean, I've met so many writers there and had great fun with them. And about that time, there was an older gentleman in Oxford who had a rare copy of a book called The Marble Fawn, William Faulkner's self-published thin book of poetry that Faulkner paid to publish, and they're extremely rare. And he wanted to sell it. My wife kind of sneaked around behind my back and bought it as a birthday gift. That was my first rare book. And I just became infatuated with rare books. And so I started collecting.
That enthusiasm really comes through.
Yeah.
Island. It really does. And it's like you're name dropping all these writers, like you want to steer your readers to all these people that you're so enthusiastic about. Yeah.
Well, Bruce Cable, our hero in the Camino series, he has a great bookstore, and he does okay with the bookstore. He makes real good money off his rare book trade.
Indeed,
he's also known. Yeah, he's spoiled. He's also known to a few federal authorities as one of the handful of book dealers who will dabble in the black market of stolen books and stolen manuscripts. And there's a great, it's a great backdrop for a story, is the thievery in rare books. It's there. And I read some articles about it, and that really piqued my interest in the black market. So that one thing led to the other, and that's how I created Camino Island with no lawyers anywhere in the book, either book, no legal thriller, but some really good stuff about books and collectors and crime, stealing, and the black market. And in Camino Winds, it starts off with a murder. It becomes a murder mystery.
Yeah, it's a true murder mystery. It's not like some of your other novels where you know who the killer is, and the big thing is the trial.
Yeah.
And here it's truly a murder mystery. We're trying to figure out who and why and how, and it's great.
Well, there's a great community of writers on Camino Island. It's all fictional. They hang out around the bookstore. Bruce is kind of the dean, the leader of the writers, the literary mafia, as he likes to call it. And during the hurricane, one of his friends, a writer who's published 2 or 3 books and done fairly well, he's sort of new to the island. He has a past. They all have a past. And his name is Nelson Kerr, and they find Nelson dead. And whoever killed Nelson tried his or her best to make it look like an accident in the hurricane. And
right.
They realized it was murder. And the police have little interest because they're busy with a hurricane. And so Bruce and a couple of sidekicks take off like overgrown Hardy Boys to solve this, who killed their friend and why? Why was he murdered? And that's the story.
Yeah, it's a great story. It feels strangely relevant for today too, because here you have this resort island essentially that's in quarantine. A disaster's hit, the tourists gone away, the businesses are boarded up. It feels very timely, unfortunately.
Yeah, we went to in 2005 when Katrina hit the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and New Orleans, very hard hit. My wife and I had friends on the Gulf Coast. Growing up in Mississippi and anywhere on the Gulf Coast down there, you hear a lot of hurricane stories. Now we lived 5 hours from the coast. We were in the extreme northern part of the state, but going to Mississippi State and Ole Miss, I had a lot of friends who were from the coast, and talking about hurricanes is just something they're all good at. Well, we had friends down there who lost everything with Katrina, and we took off not long after the storm to go check on them and to start a relief fund.
Yeah.
And we were on the ground down there with people who lost it all, and were living in tents in their front yards and FEMA trailers with no power, no electricity, no real security. At night it was really dark and black and quiet because there were no lights, and people were cooking over fires, and that was only 15 years ago. So we got a real good dose of what life is like after a horrible hurricane. And so I never thought I would write about it. But everything you do in life when you're a writer is going to get used at some point. And so it came out in Camino Winds.
Yeah, I'm very careful around writers not to reveal too much about my. I don't want to put myself in the next book.
Smart man. You better be careful. Writers steal everything. Writers steal plots, not stealing, borrow. Just whatever we see in life. Names. If I hear a great name, I'm going to write it down. I may use that in a book, or a place, or a scene, something you see in a restaurant. You may that you recall. Remember it. You could use it later. Most writers I know are always taking notes.
Have you ever known anybody like your young character, Nick Sutton, who just like read a zillion detective stories in his young life, and he's going to set out with all this energy to solve a mystery?
That kid came out of nowhere. Oftentimes when I start a book, I know what's going to happen. I mean, I have a good idea, I have an outline. I have the main characters, and with this book, it was easy because I'm using the same characters. And Nick was not mentioned in the first book, and he works in a bookstore, and he's a 21-year-old kid, I think at Wake Forest, and I forget where he's from, but each summer he goes to Camino Island to house sit his grandparents' home while they hitch up the camper and head north for cooler weather. And he loves the bookstore, he loves reading, he loves mysteries. He wants to be a crime writer one day, and he also loves the beach and the girls, and he's an all-around guy. But Bruce just loves him. He's only 21 years old, and Bruce just is really taken with this kid. And right off the bat, Nick is there when they discover the body of Nelson Kerr. And because Nick refused to leave the island under a mandatory evacuation. Bruce didn't leave. Bruce stayed there. And Nick came to Bruce's house to ride out the storm during the night. And that was a fun scene to write, them in the middle of a hurricane. Yeah. When they wake up the next morning, they realize Nelson Kerr is dead. Nick's the first one to really realize it, that the guy's been murdered, blows to the head. And he starts right off the bat putting two and two together, and probably is a bit smarter than I am because he had things figured out pretty quick.
He had things figured out by like page 10.
Well, he realized it was a murder, and he realized how it happened, or the cause of death. He had a good idea what the murder weapon was. So you know that pretty early on. The big question is why? Why would anybody want to kill their friend? And that's the real mystery.
Yeah. Oh, I should take a few seconds for a commercial message. You'll see behind me signed copies of John Grisham's Camino Winds, and I encourage everybody who's watching this to place your orders now because Father's Day is coming and supplies are limited, but we have a lot.
Are you guys open, Michael?
We are open by appointment now. This is our second day for appointments, and so far we've had a great reaction to it. We're being really careful about it. We've done a lot of curbside delivery and shipping, and we're just going to start. We're going to open slowly, and we're going to be ready if things spike to close up again and just respond to the science of it all.
Tell me about the store. I'm fascinated by a store that was founded in 1898 and still is going strong. You've owned it for 25 years, and
I have, yeah.
How many owners have been there?
I'm the fifth owner. So, yeah, there's been a lot of longevity. People just get here and they can't quit it. And I bought it in 1994, and my wife wants me to retire, but we're still having that conversation.
Yeah.
It may be some time yet.
What are you seeing during the pandemic? I mean, are you hanging on by your fingernails and selling a few books and keeping most of your staff?
We're keeping our staff as much as possible. We're all, taking a cut to be able to do that. And, the Paycheck Protection Program gave us 8 weeks of sort of a grace period, and that's expiring soon. So we're making some choices, but our goal is to get to the other side of the pandemic with our team as intact as it can be, because it's a great team.
Do you think, I'm asking other booksellers this question as I virtually tour around the country, are you seeing a sort of pent-up demand for books? Our numbers so far with Camino Winds has been out for a month. The numbers are pretty good. They're very encouraged in New York at how the book is selling, and we're hoping that people are reading more, rediscovering reading.
I think it's true. I think with people cooped up in their homes and working from home, and they're on their screens all day with these virtual meetings and Zoom meetings, just kind of like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
But, they crave an opportunity, I think, to get off the screen and to just be quiet and private and engage their mind with a book. And so we're seeing a lot of that, and we're seeing a lot of homeschooling as well, where parents are looking for books to help their kids when school isn't in session.
Yeah, I'm hoping that, when it's all over, whenever it's going to be over, nobody, not even the experts can tell us when things might get back to whatever normal is going to be. I'm hoping that what you've learned selling books, what publishers have learned, it might make us stronger, might make us better, might make us, I don't know. Are you optimistic?
I'm generally optimistic. I'm not sure if it's a strength or some slight character flaw, but I'm always optimistic about things. So I do think that it certainly focuses the mind. A pandemic like this, it makes you step up. It gives you renewed energy and just a kind of mission. You know what your mission is.
Yeah, good. Best of luck to you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Back to Camino Winds.
Back to Camino Winds.
We're giving away too much of the plot in Camino Winds. We can't solve the mystery with this virtual stop today. We gotta let the readers take.
Gotta let the readers. That's right. You gotta let the readers solve the mystery. So I missed one character. Mercer Mann was not as present in Camino Winds. Is she coming back for book number 3?
Thank you for asking. She's one of my favorites from Camino Island. I really liked her. She's 32, 33 years old. She's struggling as a writer. Her first 2 or 3 books didn't sell. As we meet her in Camino Winds, she's taken a victory lap. Her 3rd novel has come out. It's called Tessa. It's about her grandmother, who was named Tessa, who was killed down there at Camino Island in a storm. And she loved her grandmother. Mercer had a very chaotic childhood. Her mother has been locked away for some time. Her father was an absentee father. And she adored her grandmother, Tessa. And every summer from a very young age, she would spend the entire summer on the beach with her grandmother, on Camino Island. Mm-hmm. And she loved the place. And when her grandmother was killed, it was devastating for Mercer. She was about 19 years old when her grandmother was killed. And so she's always wanted to write a story about her grandmother. And so she's written this novel called Tessa, and she's touring with it. And the critics love it. It's selling well. It's on the New York Times list. And I did that because I remember vividly when I got the phone call from New York in March of 1991. I was at the bookstore, Square Books, having coffee with Richard Holworth, just, killing time. And my wife called. This is before cell phones, before the internet. And she had just taken a call from New York with the news that the firm would debut on the New York Times list at number 12. They published the top 15. And it's a little bit different now, a little bit. It's still a big deal. When you're a debut author and you hit the big list, it's a big deal. And back then it meant that you got another wave of notoriety. There were more interviews. There were more people. They actually got me back to New York to do more interviews and things because there was a lot of curiosity when a new writer appears. And I was only 36 years old. So I thought I was a grown man. I guess I was, but that seems awfully young now. But it was a big deal to hit the list, back then. So I wanted to give the readers a taste for what it's like as a struggling writer when you make it, when you hit the big list. And there's talk about how she's going to get a new contract, a 2-book deal that's going to really, make her career. So that's stuff I've lived through, and I want to share that with the readers.
Well, I'll tell you the story of Tessa. I mean, my wife was reading Camino Winds too, and she says, "Well, we never did find out exactly what happened to Tessa and Porter. Maybe that's the next book." And I said,
"Well, you asked the question. You asked the question. I didn't answer it. I think the 3rd book is going to feature Mercer. All the books are going to take place on Camino Island or around Camino Island there. Camino Island is based on Amelia Island, where we vacation, north of Jacksonville. Beautiful little island. We've been going there for 25 years. We have a house there now. And we go down there as often as we can year round. But there's some really rich history to Amelia Island. I think there were like 6 or 7 flags that flew over it throughout its history. There were slave ships and illegal slave runners and all kinds of rich historical drama that I'd like to go back and kind of mine that for a while. And maybe with Mercer, maybe Mercer's doing that. I don't know, but I want to feature Mercer in the next book.
Yeah, great. She's such a great character. Just all the adventures she had in that first book. And is Bruce coming back too?
Bruce will always be back. Bruce is growing up. He's 45 years old. He has a great wife. She's French or half French, and they've had this open marriage for a long time, and it's very open. And Bruce has a real weakness for young female writers who are touring and usually alone, and he enjoys them. And then they usually want to party, and of course they're all great looking. So you gotta love fiction. That's Bruce's world. He's always liked the ladies, but he's also growing up, and he's becoming more and more committed to his lovely wife, and she to him. And but he's always going to be at the bookstore, somewhere near the center of the plot. Right.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So it looks like we just have like a couple of minutes left. One thing, let me remind people, Camino Winds. We have signed copies, signed by the author, Mr. John Grisham, best-selling author. Father's Day is coming. Buy early, buy often. Before we go, I was wondering, did you want to say, this is a little out of left field, but you're not only a writer, you're also heavily involved in something called the Innocence Project. And I've always been fascinated with that. Do you want to take just a second to talk about that?
Sure, thank you. It goes back to 2004. It goes back before then. When I was a lawyer, I did a lot of criminal cases, and that's why I never made any money. But I never had a client, and most of them are guilty pleas. I never had a client I thought was wrongfully convicted. We had, in our jurisdiction in North Mississippi, we had good judges, good prosecutors. I knew all the policemen, and everybody handled the cases straight up. And we worked out deals, and the machinery of justice went smooth. So I had never worried about wrongful convictions, never thought about them until, and somehow I missed the first wave of the big DNA high-profile exonerations in the late 90s. But 2004, 2005, I got involved with a story about a man who had just died, and he spent 11 years in prison in Oklahoma, came within 5 days of being executed for a murder he did not commit, and he was exonerated by DNA. DNA also nailed the real killer, who's still locked up in Oklahoma. It's just a fascinating case, and I wrote the story. The Innocent Man is my only nonfiction book, and I'm not sure I'll do that again. It's way too much work for me, but I love the story. And so they asked me to join the board of the Innocence Project in New York, and I've been on the board now for a long time. And that's our work. We have a big staff with a nice budget, raise every dime of it, and privately, because we have to. There's no state money for that. The state does not acknowledge wrongful convictions. And we have close to 370 DNA exonerations in the past 25 years, which may sound like a low number, given that there are thousands of innocent people in prison. And we know that and we believe that, and we work to change that through legislation and policy. That's the other half of what we do at the Innocence Project. But it's a wonderful organization, and I enjoy serving on it. I've also been involved with the Innocence Project here at the University of Virginia and one at the University of Mississippi. So that's in my last book, The Guardians, came out last fall. It was all about wrongful convictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're doing great work there. I just wanted to give it a shout out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess we're out of time. We had half an hour. It went very fast. Thank you so much. You're a great interviewee.
Thank you, Michael. You're a great interrogator.
Well, I knew how to shut up. Well, thank you. John Grisham, author of Camino Winds. Signed copies are available at Gibson's Bookstore. We'd like to thank John Grisham for joining us today, and everybody out there, read a lot, read John Grisham, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.